那今天晚上呢，按照惯例呢，是我们 IvyCompass 的 host，我们 IvyCompass 的中文名字叫指南针教育咨询。虽然我们不大，是一个 boutique 的机构，但是我们的 reputation 还是不错的。我们的主要的目标呢是致力于将北美像今天晚上这样的前藤校招生官像这样，等一会儿我会介绍，他是 Cornell 的招生办主任，还不是一般的招生官所以他的信息和知识量是非常丰富的。我们还有一些独立的升学顾问。包括艺术作品的这个作品集的辅导，还有音乐方面的、画画方面的、animation 方面的、AP 方面的课程，ACT，you name it。只要是跟升学相关的，所需要的帮助孩子来增强他的竞争力的这些教育资源，我们都有去努力的搜寻，然后通过我们对他们的这些筛选和这个对接，把对工作认真负责的，能够真实实在在的，能够对我们的孩子有帮助的这些资源呢，来贡献给大家去选择。所以 IvyCompass 因为我们有这个 AFI 的平台，所以我们还会有一些很好的志愿者的机会，还社会影响力啊、高科研包括实习等背景提升的项目。那我们的宗旨一再强调，除了帮助孩子升学的过程，我认为如果家长和学生能够很好的认识到和很好的、很智慧的去管理我们整个的这个 consulting 的过程，实际上是可以帮助到孩子在这个成熟成长方面和思考方面是会有一个2个到3个台阶的这个提升。你包括像我们每次跟学生开完会以后，我们会提醒孩子如何去操纵，我们的导师如何在及时的情况下跟我们导师做一个及时的这个汇报，这个就是教小孩子在工作岗位上怎么去 managing up。很多孩子可能还没有这样一个机会，怎么去管理老师的 relationship。那最后在这个提供这个推荐信的时候，就能够获得一个很不错的一个inline 的这样的一个 message。今天到现在为止，就是大家已经基本上陆陆续续的都已经获得了该获得的录取结果哈。当然就是有的时候我们导师也开玩笑的说，那问来问去都会有家长问你们今年的录取结果怎么样呀？然后这几个导师学生都去了哪里呀？所以你可以看到，所有这些学校都有我们过去学生的这个身影哈，我就不一一读了。如果您对我们 IvyCompass 和指南针还不熟悉的话呢，你可以扫描我们的公众号。那么Allison 带领团队也经常会分享一些非常有干货的一些内容和文章。如果您希望在我们的微信群里持续关注我们一些这样的干货的分享，那你可以扫描我们的右手边的小助手二维码，这样的话我们就可以在今天晚上讲座之后把你请到我们的微信群里，这样的话你就可以持续听到这样的干货的一些信息。我常常说，学生最后走到多远，走到多高，我们家长的认知绝对是一个天花板啊！因为我发现这真是相辅相成的。那些优秀的学生，你发现家长们都很知道怎么管理这个 resource，管理这个我们之间的这样的一个工作的 relationship。那我们的这个网站呢，已经修改全面上线。您可以去看我们这个网站上面的精彩的一些信息，包括今天晚上的讲座包括有些内容你可能觉得 PPT 想要保留下来，你除了可以拍照片截屏，你也可以去看我们的回放。一般我们的回放在1周左右，都会陆陆续续的放到我们的网站上。现在呢，如果你没有注册的话呢，只能看3个过去的这个讲座。注册了信息，第一个呢是可以获得30分钟的一些我们不同的导师。您如果喜欢哪位导师的话，我们可以跟你安排一个30分钟的一个免费咨询，同时注册完了以后才可以去看到一些其他的信息啊。那么这些导师们，大家可以看到，像 John 今天晚上的分享是 Cornell 的前招生官，Don 是普林斯顿的前招生官，还有 Jason 是哈佛大学的前招生官。那么陆陆续续可以看到大家，也可以看到一些很不同的一些资讯，包括 Jason Paul Jenny 呀、龙飞呀、音乐呀，包括 Raymond 帮助了很多的学生在 economic 方面做了很好的 research。我们还有一些其他的，像物理的杨春来博士等等等等，这些资源都是帮助到了很多孩子来增强他们的这个整体的这个素质和竞争力。那今天晚上呢，我还是快速的介绍一下这个 John。很多人已经很了解John 的背景了哈。那今天晚上他的主题呢是 Everything you need to know about Cornell。那2024年、2025年申请季刚过，所以他也会做一些结果的分享哪些是 under 它的这个预测啊，预测非常准，这样的预测是非常准的，哪一些是有些 surprise 的。那么未来这个名校录取的趋势，竞争越来越激烈啊，这个 Alison 也讲过，so 内卷的非常厉害，so difficult and so challenging every single year。那今天晚上呢，John 还会讲一下像 Cornell 这样的大学的流程解析。其实这些好的大学，他们都是 similar，都在找那个最优秀的学生和最优秀的那一批。所以学生你其实到了哪个 level，你去哪个学校，完全是由您准备了多少的 evidence 和你自己本身的这个 curiosity，还有包括你自己的素质所决定的。那么他会通过不同的角度来讲一下，我们怎么样做一些申请材料才具备竞争力。到底这样在辅导的时候，他有跟其他导师哪些的不同？他为什么是大家特别受欢迎的一位导师？啊，好，那John, I'm finished introduction for AFI, and also tonight is your feature. Now the floor is yours, and we're looking forward to learn from you once
Thank
again.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sophia. Much appreciated. All right, great. So I'm going to share my screen here for just a moment. I'll start the conversation with results from last year. Give me one moment here. Okay, so I know this is not very pretty, but this is the spreadsheet of results from this past year. I'm kind of giving you guys an inside look here at the way I look at this. You can see every single row here is a student. I had 45 students that worked with me in some capacity this past year under the Morganelli method. That doesn't mean they all worked under the significant guidance the way I do with IvyCompass, but all of them worked under the structure that I've created. And so what you can see here is that the first thing is that I predict, based on a pretty complex algorithm, the likelihood of students' chances. I call it the benchmark algorithm. And I will benchmark students across 17 different metrics, which are basically the way highly selective colleges and universities make decisions. And then so I try to give the students pretty good insight into their chances at different levels of selectivity. So you can see here in column F, this is probably the most important column here. This is the prediction. Did the student perform as expected? Did they overperform or did they underperform? And so you can see we had a great year overall. Most of the students, most of the column here is green. Some students overperforming by one selectivity category. So we can go into the details of that later, but basically let's just say for argument's sake, I tell a student that I think they should apply to a 20% in mid-rate school, and then they apply to a 10% in mid-rate school, and they're successful. That might be succeeding or overperforming by one category. If they were to underperform, then it might be one category as well. So you can see students did really quite well. We had a few underperformers here at the bottom of the list by one in each of them. One of the things that my team and I do is we try to go back and ask ourselves, why? Why did students, we don't really ask why they overperformed. We generally know why they overperformed, but why did they underperform, if at all? And so you can see the first student that underperformed here is going to Cornell, which, is a fantastic school, but based upon the way I benchmarked the student, I felt that they might have been a top 5 level school. And so when I look back and I ask myself, why did we end up at Cornell? Still a fantastic outcome, but maybe not a Harvard or an MIT. The answer is pretty clear here. It's school group competition. Student goes to a very, very challenging high school where the competition's incredibly fierce at the very top of the class. And so they're not going to take multiples at MIT, right? And so if you have really, really strong students at the top of your class, that can be challenging. You can see a student over here, also an underperform, is going to Brown. Again, a fantastic school. I thought that student was a Harvard, Princeton, Yale, Stanford, MIT level student as well. That student is an international student from Greece. And, it can be challenging in the international market compared to the domestic market. You get some atypical decisions. You can see down here a couple others. The student's a fantastic student going to Georgetown. I thought the student underperformed just a tiny bit. I think the reason when we look back really is the topic. The application was a business application built around decentralized exchanges, like decentralized finance. Really tough topic to connect to readers with. You can see another one here, I think underperform due to the major, health sciences, super, super challenging for a female Asian health science student. So you get a little bit of an underperform right there. Once in a while, you see, I'm not 100% sure yet, right? Like we're students that are still sitting on the wait list, students in at BU, but has underperformed thus far. And we're still kind of doing some analysis on that. It's not obvious to me exactly why. Overall, though, the results were really quite fantastic. You can see here, of the 45 students I worked with, 12 of those 45 are going to US News top 10 universities. That's 26% of my students going to top 10 schools. 25 of my 45 students are going to Ivy or Ivy Plus schools. So the Ivy League schools are the 7 Ivy League schools, and the plus are MIT, Duke, and Stanford. So all the Ivy League schools plus MIT, Duke, and Stanford are considered the Ivy Plus group. There's a conference amongst all the admissions directors every 2 years. I hosted it when I was in Ithaca at Cornell. And so I track that number. That was the highest number I've ever had, 54% of my students going to one of those 10 schools. 63% of the students going to top 15 schools in the country, 73% you see going to top 25, and then 98% of my students are going to top 50 schools. At the very bottom of the list where things didn't work out exactly as we had hoped, you get some students going to a BU level school, University of Florida level school, but that's really, generally on the margins. Most of my students are doing quite well. I did have one student that decided not to apply ED to a Ivy League school. I thought had a great chance at Cornell, but decided to go to an international school, Warwick. And then I have 5 students out of the 45 that I've worked with that I consider to be quote unquote active on the wait list, meaning that, maybe they're in the top 25 right now, or maybe they're in the top 15, but they're sitting on the wait list at one of these places. And so some of these numbers may shift as we get finalized decisions closer to May. But probably the best year I've ever had as a whole. That does not mean that no one's unhappy, right? Like from time to time, students don't perform exactly as I expect, but as a whole, most of them overperform, and many of them are, over the moon with where they're going at this stage. Okay, let me stop that share, and also let me just share the presentation where we can kind of start to talk through a little bit about, my philosophy and how that impacts, some of the things you might think about doing in high school. Okay. So this presentation was titled How to Get into Cornell, Everything You Need to Know. You can use Cornell as a euphemism for pretty much every school. Now, I will say Cornell is a very unique school, and we will talk about it in detail in this presentation. It won't be overly long. I will leave plenty of time for conversation and questions. But Cornell is similar to most national research universities in what they're looking for and how they make admissions decisions. It's just that they happen to have many unique college types, and that impacts the types of decisions they make in those unique colleges. Okay, let's take a look at what we have to do. So I talked about our 2024-2025 student results. Again, fantastic year overall. I will talk about Cornell University. I'll talk through the different requirements by college type and a little bit about the application process, talk a little bit about some of the special programs and early decision options at Cornell, and then kind of give you some overall tips about how to build a strong application, hopefully focusing most of our time on the Q&A. Okay, as many of you already know, about my background, so I won't waste time on there. I do want to spend a little bit of time here. PAGE is the acronym that I use. I spend a lot of time thinking through how to describe to students and to parents what is valued in this process. It feels like a mystery, but it's really not. It's actually rather clear. But it's nuanced, right? There's a nuance to this. And so what the PAGE acronym is hopefully getting at is the nuance. So let's just talk through this just a little bit. P, as you can see, stands for perspective. A stands for activity. G stands for goal. And E stands for ethos, PAGE, right? That's the acronym. I want to start with G, goal, right? And then you can think about this when applying to college, applying for a job, in an interview. It doesn't really matter. You have a goal. Sometimes there's a macro goal, right? Like, I want to go to college, right? Maybe you have a little bit more micro goal, like I want to study public economics in college. Or maybe you even have a more specific goal than that, like I'm interested in housing insecurity related to public economics to be studied in college. But the point here is that we have a goal, and it's really important that we know our goal, because it's difficult to identify what things you should do or what things you should identify that you've already done to support your goal if you don't know what your goal is, right? So goal is super important. In my process, most of the time, the goal that I'm focused on is your intended or your prospective major, right? What is the intended or prospective major that we will be identifying on the application for admission? That's the rubric that they're going to use to evaluate whether or not they want to add you to the community. So that's the goal. And at least the first goal that I think about is, what is your intended major? Is this anthropology? Is this biology? Is this history? Is this public health? What is our goal? Okay. Once we know our goal, and as I noted before, it is important to have more specific goals when you're trying to build a fantastic app. But once you know your goal, the next thing you have to ask yourself is, if I'm young, how would I spend my time? What activities or actions would I take in order to come closer to my goal, to show that I care about my goal? And if I am older already, and I've already spent a bunch of time doing a variety of things, if I look at my goal, I have to ask myself, which ones do I want to choose to highlight, to illustrate, to be illustrative of who I am and what I value within the context of my goal? So I might say, for example, that I'm a intended journalism major, right? That's my goal. Maybe a more specific goal might be something about freedom of press or something. Maybe you have a perspective about that. But the initial goal is I'm interested as an intended or prospective journalism major. Now, if I'm young, I have to ask myself, if I wanted to show how curious I am about journalism, what might I do? Sure, I might go to a summer program, right? Maybe I would interview journalists. Maybe I'd write articles, right? But there's lots of different things that you could be doing with your time. And the goal is the rubric. If I was identifying myself as a intended math major, right? Does that mean that writing articles would be of no value? No, but it very clearly is not as connected as if I was a journalism major, right? If I was a journalism major, writing articles would be fundamental to my goal. If I was a prospective math major, it might not be fundamental. And so we're always using the goal as the rubric for my activities to make sure that my activities are supportive of the goal. If they are, they're generally more important. If they're less connected to the goal, they are generally less important. So activities support the goals. I would say for most students that I know that apply to highly selective schools, this is not too much of an issue. They generally understand the concept of goal, activity supporting goal. The third letter, though, is where we start to kind of fall off usually with most of the students that I work with, that they don't necessarily understand the P part, the perspective. They understand the goal, they understand the activities that support the goal, but they miss the value of their perspective. So you have to imagine for a moment that, as you think about your own life, each of you, whether you're a student or an adult, right, you were all raised differently by different parents with different cultural backgrounds, different expectations, different levels of sternness in the way they reprimand, different levels of goal expectation, right? So we all just grow up differently with different experiences in our lives. When we enter an activity, whatever activity that might be, maybe I play soccer, maybe I'm an editor for the newspaper, whatever activity is that I am engaging in, my perspective, the things that happen to me that change the way I see the world or hardened or secure the way I see the world, those things are impacting the way you function in the activity, right? So, if I grew up in a certain way, it's going to impact me as an editor in the newspaper, as a teammate, as a fundraiser. All those things impact the way I function. And so what the readers really do want to understand is the interplay between the perspective and the activity. What is it about you? Not necessarily why you did what you did, that's fine, but oftentimes they want to understand is how you did what you did. And the how is often based on your perspective, the way you function in the world, the way you grew up in the world, the things that you do that impact the way you perceive yourself. On top of that, when you're engaging in this activity, your perspective is often being challenged or impacted in some way. So you come to the activity with a perspective, but your activity often evolves, or your perspective often evolves through the activity itself. And they want to see that. They want to understand, who were you when you entered? Who were you in the middle of it? Who were you when you ended that activity? And how did your perspective evolve as it relates to who you are and how you see the world? That's a really important part. And a lot of students seem to miss that. They seem to think that their perspective doesn't matter or they don't have anything unique to say. But the truth is, as it relates to what you do, you probably don't have a whole lot unique to say. I mean, most high school students have access to similar experiences. So if you're focused on outdoing people, it's challenging, right? To find things that no one else has ever done. But you can do things that other people have done and have a unique perspective on it. That's not challenging at all. It's almost inherent because we just don't see the world the same way. What it requires is reflection, right? It requires intentionality to say, that was my goal. These are the activities that are supporting my goal. And I'm wondering what perspectives impacted the way I function in that activity. And I'm also wondering, how did that activity change my perspective? The interplay is really important. And then the final letter here is E, ethos. And that really is a combination of all that I said so far. I try to put that, you can call ethos a theme or a brand. But when it's all said and done, what we're saying is we want to identify how we are planning on positioning a student in an application. The application itself is limited, right? There's 650-word personal statement. The supplemental essays all, for the most part, have word limits. Your activity list has a 150-character limit. So decisions must be made. If you try to be everything to everyone, you will come across as very surface level, lack of curiosity, a lack of depth. You are not going to be able to portray all of who you are in this application. So you must make decisions and be intentional and thoughtful and reflective about how you want to portray yourself. If you do this thoughtfully, intentionally, even if you don't make the decisions I would make, for example, the intentionality itself, the decisions to say, well, I could put myself out there as X, but I think I'm going to put myself out there as Y. That intentionality will fundamentally change the way your app is perceived. It will give it form, it will give it structure, a feel to it, and it will allow the readers to communicate to their friends, which is what basically this is, like a lunchroom conversation around why should we admit John? Why should we admit Carolyn? Why should we admit Sandy? They need to be able to communicate it literally through words or maybe a couple sentences written down. And your job is to hand that to them on a platter to say, I know there's a million things I could say, but this is what I want to say about myself. And this is how I'm going to portray myself in this process. Okay, I know that's a lot to take in, but the short answer is you really need to reflect on yourself, who you are, how you do what you do, and what you will bring to a campus. And that needs to all be filtered through your experiences. Okay, now that's a generality about how we think about building the college app. I create a portfolio for every student. I call it the Pages portfolio because page, perspective, activity, goal, ethos is how we think about every single moment when we're building an application of experiences for students. Now we're going to shift into something a little bit more specific, and we're going to talk about Cornell, right? As you looked at the students that I had, I think 13 of the students of my 45 students this past year are going to Cornell, which is like 25% or more of my students going to Cornell. Obviously, because of my background there, it's a significant draw. Now, I would say the unique thing about Cornell is that it's my old boss at Lehigh used to call it the funky Ivy, and it is a funky Ivy in that it is part public and part private. They have contract colleges where they must take 50% of their enrollment from the state of New York. That changes the dynamic, of course, of the review process if you must take 50% of your students from the state of New York. You can see, well, actually, it's not on this screen, but the contract colleges, the main colleges that you might be really familiar with, like College of Arts and Sciences, the College of Engineering, the College of Business, those are not contract colleges. Those are not colleges that require 50% of the students to come from the state of New York. It's generally the more specialty colleges that have these requirements, like there's the ILR school, the School of Industrial Labor Relations, the College of Human Ecology, the College of Agriculture and Life Sciences. These colleges have that mandate, and it changes the dynamic. The other thing that's important to recognize as we go through, and we'll talk about these different college types, is that unlike many universities, where it really is a university focus, the way they function is at the university level. There's a leadership team at the university level that makes a lot of decisions. At Cornell, that's really not the case. They do have leadership at the university level, but each college is kind of independently functioning and operating. They have their own board of trustees. They have their own director of admissions, right? So it's like these little colleges all functioning within the context of Cornell, but independently. That's very atypical. Not many schools function like that. What happens in that dynamic is that each of the colleges, even though they're under the Cornell umbrella, because they all are functioning independently, they kind of create their own ethos and culture. And what happens is in each of these colleges, especially the really specific colleges like CALS and ILR, they become very focused on a specific type of student because a really strong culture gets created. The College of Agriculture and Life Sciences has a specific culture. And so they're willing to take students that maybe statistically don't exactly fit what they're looking for, as long as it fits their mission intellectually and academically. And you see that ILR is a great example where they will take students that, I used to meet with the directors of admissions of each of the colleges every week when I was at Cornell as part of our staff meetings. And it was just obvious that like certain directors of admissions they had a mandate from the deans that had nothing to do with data. It wasn't focused on the admit rate or the SAT average. It was about a connection to the work that's being done in that college type. So that really changes the dynamic of what Cornell is all about. The common mistakes that I see, number one, is that they apply to the wrong college, right? Like there's 7 different colleges you could very easily apply to at Cornell, and there's a ton of overlap, a ton of overlap. If you go to Cornell and ask people who work there, tell me, what's the difference between computer science and engineering and computer science and arts and sciences and computer science in the College of Computing Sciences? They literally don't know. Like the advisors don't know because it's so complex and there's so much overlap. So it's a challenging place, but if you can get your arms around it and understand where you fit, you can really be successful in a way that you can't really be at some other highly, highly selective institutions. So wrong college type, super important. You really need to know all the college types. We'll talk about that in just a moment. Wrong intended major. So this is true at most universities, but very true at Cornell, in that I'm always thinking about 2 things. How many apps will there be? And what's the quality of those apps? So it's the quantity and the quality. How many apps is important? Like how popular is this thing? If I were to apply as a sociology student, right, versus an anthropology student, let's just say the experiences that I have in high school could be very similar. There's a lot of overlap between those areas. Which one's more popular? What's the quantity? Sociology is more popular. What about the quality? Based on the experiences that I've seen of students that apply as sociology students versus anthropology students, which ones will have more research? Which ones will have more experience in their community? Which ones will have more leadership? Very clearly, it will be sociology. Anthropology is very underrepresented. But the point here is that there's a quality analysis that's really important. So it's first, I got to think, what college type am I applying to? And then the second question I have to ask myself is, under that college type, what intended major might I consider? And what's the quantity and the quality of the applicants in those areas? And then finally, weak or limited engagement. Cornell and many highly selective schools, but Cornell specifically, is a show your work type of school. There's a 650-word essay from many of the colleges, at Cornell that say, tell us what you want to study, tell us how you investigated it, and tell us what makes you likely to contribute in this space at this institution. And so if you haven't done anything, even if your grades are really good and maybe you've been involved in a lot of different things, but they're not very clearly connected to what you say you're intellectually curious about, if you don't have multiples experiences to support that, it's very hard to apply to Cornell just because of the length of what they ask you to write. University of Michigan, same thing. University of Chicago, same thing. They ask you for a lot of evidence. MIT requires, if you apply to an engineering school, they require a maker portfolio. So the point is, like, many of these top tier schools require evidence, not just writing what you're saying, but they want to see the work. And that takes a little time. It's not impossible. It's not hard, actually. It takes intentionality and time. And each area of academia requires a different level of evidence engagement. So if you pick an area that's high quantity apps and high quality apps, well, then you better have really high quality engagement evidence, right? If you pick an area that has lower quantity apps, lower quality apps, well, then your engagement evidence might not have to be as compelling because they just don't have as many options.
Hey, John, can I stop you for a second here? I want you to spend a little more time to emphasize this because I find every time when the student, standing on student, have a conversation with you, have a meeting with you, me and Allison, we have to do some of the groundwork on behind, meaning I can tell during that meeting because especially for Chinese community, because majority of people are coming here for graduate school, the parents.
Right.
So they bring the Chinese mentality and mindset is in China, when you're applying for colleges, you have to decide what major, and that major carries you get into that, admitted into that colleges, meaning so everybody cannot change. That confuse hell a lot of Chinese community and family because they are so worried about their kids if they use social science or something to apply for colleges and they cannot find a job. So
Right.
when you talk about this, they all look very positive. They may be saying, oh, yes, 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 yes. But behind the scene, I can tell from their face, they did not understand. And I know until they understand this, everything you do, everything you guide them to do will be on the air because then was not targeted, was not prospective, it was not goal oriented. So can you maybe spend a little time to really explaining to the community the major things are different US than China? Can you spend some time on that?
Yeah, it's a great question. The thing about the U.S., the way they do this with with the majors, is that as we all probably are aware, these universities are businesses, right? They're businesses, and their job is to maintain the business function, which is educating students. But of course, when you look at the business function, they have faculty members in all these areas, right? They have Greek literature, and they have the classics, they have anthropology, sociology, communications, agricultural, life sciences, right? They have all these different areas, and they need students in all those areas. So now the thing in the United States is that they preach flexibility at the marketing stage, So when you go and you talk to these colleges and you ask them, what if my child changes their mind? They all talk about flexibility. Oh, you'll be able to change, which is true. So when you apply to a university and you put down economics as your major, they're saying that's not really your major. You're putting it down in your application, but you will have an opportunity when you get there to quote unquote declare your major. Declaring your major means you go to your advisor, you have a conversation, you then get there's a form for the department, you fill out the form, you sign it. Sometimes there's prerequisites like, did you take this class? Did you take that class? Did you get a certain grade in the class? That's declaring your major. That happens generally in your second semester of your sophomore year of college. Prior to that, you're basically undecided at most schools. If you apply to an engineering school, sometimes they put you right into the major, but most of the time you're officially undecided. Even if you applied as an economics student or a biology student, if you went into your advisor and you said, look in the system for me, first semester, look in the system, what's my major? And they would say undecided. You'd say, well, I applied as a biology student. And they'd say, yeah, that's what you put on your application, but you haven't actually declared biology yet. So you're undecided. We noted in the system that you're planning on declaring biology. So it's important to make that distinction, to recognize that what I put down on my application is your intended or your prospective major. It's not your actual major. Now, the question then becomes, if it's not my actual major, how important is it? Is it important at all? And the answer is yes, it's very important. Even though it's not your actual major, it's very important because they're using it as a rubric or a lens from which to consider you. So if John Morganelli applies to Cornell as a biology student, and then John Morganelli also could have applied to Cornell as a, let's say, policy student, the lens that they will use to consider me will be different. My competition will be different, right? They're going to look at me and they're say, oh, John, you're a biology student. Now I want to compare you to all the biology students. Did you do any in-lab research? Did you apply to Regeneron or Intel? There's things that they see, right, from biology students. If I say I'm a anthropology student, well, then they're going to look at me and they're going to say, what do I expect to see from John as an anthropology student? And the truth is they'd say, well, we don't really know exactly what we expect from an anthropology student because we don't have that many of them and because what they do is so varied. When I see them, they do a wide variety of different things. So I, as a reader, don't really have a clear expectation in my mind of exactly what an anthropology student looks like. And there's way less of them that I can compare you to. In biology, I know exactly what a biology student looks like. I could tell you what competitions I expect to see, and I have hundreds of them that I could compare you to if I'm not sure. So this conversation around intended major is really important. Of course, we always get to this part, right, where it's like there's this tension, and that tension is basically, should, if I'm a parent, right, should I tell my child to follow their passion? Maybe they want to be a physician. Should I tell them to follow their passion? Or are you telling me, John, that I should be doing something different? Should I tell my child not to follow their passion? Well, that depends on the strength of the passion, of course, right? But it is important for students and parents to be aware that, there's something to be said for following your passion. I never mess around with passion. You can't outwork someone who's passionate. But what I run into a lot of times is students are generally not as passionate often at this very early age as maybe their parents hope they are. Sometimes they are, but sometimes they're not. And if they're not, that doesn't mean they're not intellectually curious or very capable, because many of them are. It's just that they're not so passionate that they're willing, or at least that once they understand the dynamic, that they're willing to take on all the competition for really no advanced placement, right? Like, hey, I'm going to apply as a biology student. I took on all this competition. I got in. Awesome. Am I in a better position than if I had applied as a policy student and got in? No, I'm in the exact same position. It's exactly the same. So the question always is, what is the best pathway for this student? And the answer sometimes is a very challenging pathway, because that challenge coincides with their passion, and their passion is so strong that it makes no sense to move away from that. That happens. But sometimes their passion is a little weaker, and it coincides with all the other people's kind of weak passions. And so we say, well, why don't we just shift a little bit to something else that you're kind of only quasi-passionate about that happens to be significantly less challenging, that we could build a story that would get you to the spot you actually want to go to. And then you can decide, right, whether or not this is the direction. Again, this is a case-by-case basis, a significant conversation that I have with every student. As Sophia noted, it is a challenging conversation. Most college admissions consultants skip it, mostly because it's easier to skip it. It's easier just to say, okay, what are you interested in? I'll build you the best story possible, without really showing them all the pathways. The pathways become complex, and there's varying degrees of risk, and you need to communicate all of that for a family to make an informed decision. But as Sophia knows, I do it probably to my own detriment. Sometimes families don't understand it. Sometimes they feel like I'm pushing them in a direction that is uncomfortable. But when it's all said and done, I think it's important for families to know, to have all the information. And if they don't feel comfortable, then maybe I'm not the right consultant for them. But I do think, I want all the information when I make a decision. So I try to give the same information to the families I work with. Okay. Thinking through now the colleges at Cornell. So it really is important to think through this if you're going to apply. How might you position yourself? Arts and sciences, obviously, where I was the director of admissions, is the most traditional of the colleges. It is, in fact, the Ivy League college at Cornell. And so when you think about the key majors at Cornell in arts and sciences, yes, like biology, computer science, economics, those majors are the most popular. But they basically have most everything in arts and sciences, less business and engineering. Now, some of the specialty colleges like industrial labor relations and stuff, we'll talk about the unique stuff they have. But I would say Cornell Arts and Sciences has everything minus business and engineering. It is probably the most challenging college to get into. You could argue engineering, depending on the type of applicant. I would say arts and sciences is the most challenging of the colleges, though, to get into. Engineering. Engineering uses math curriculum sequence as a filter function. They literally ask on the app, what is your highest math class in senior year? Oops, did I lose you with my camera went off? I apologize. They literally ask usually senior year what your strongest math class would be, and it's a moving average. So if, for example, you're in AP Calc AB last year, that would be fine, and you would have been reviewed. But let's just say, for argument's sake, that a higher percentage of the students were in AP BC Calc in senior year than the year prior. It's possible that they use that as a new filter function to say, well, we're not going to look for students unless they're underrepresented or have some uniqueness to them, unless they are in AP BC. So math sequence for engineering is super important. If you're female and you have a really strong math sequence, you can argue honestly that you don't even if you don't have a lot of engineering engagement evidence, you can still be very successful with a really strong math background, especially for females in the engineering side. I will also note, when you look at engineering, there's a distribution of majors, of course, that are all engineering, but they're not all created equally. Even though we can say mechanical engineering and electrical engineering, biomedical engineering, they're all engineering. The quantity, right, and the quality of the applications will not be the same. So, free advice here for any of you who are even considering engineering. By far, the most strategic pathway to engineering is civil engineering. It's not even close. There's no debate in my mind. And when you think about the quantity and the quality of the apps, the quantity is low, the quality is low. And when you look at what a civil engineer is, in my mind, it's a fantastic application because it's about community engineering, solving problems for the community. You can have mechanical, electrical, computer experiences under that civil engineering umbrella and be super successful. So something to think about as it relates to the engineering school, a very strategic pathway into Cornell. You have the SC Johnson College of Business. It's important to note that if you look at Wharton, for example, almost all of these top tier schools basically have one or two majors. It's usually applied econ and management is kind of like the name. I think Wharton is just, it's called applied economics. But when you look at it, basically that's what it is. And then the rest of the programs like finance and accounting and marketing, those are all generally concentrations. Now, what I would tell you that's really important to recognize about this, when you look at the distribution, again, the quantity, right, and the quality of the applications, if you just look at the term applied econ and management, right, and think about econ versus management, what percentage of the students are going to be leaning of the business students are going to lean into econ versus lean into management? It's going to be overwhelmingly econ. It won't even be close. Management really isn't like a thing that a lot of high school students really get into, organizational efficiency management processes. And so it's a super effective and efficient way to get into the business college, just like civil engineering is a super effective and efficient way to get into the engineering college. Okay, now we get into a contract college, College of Agriculture and Life Sciences. If you live in the state of New York, right, you could apply as a biology student to arts and sciences at Cornell, or you could apply as a biology student to CALS at Cornell. If you live in the state of New York, it would be very clearly smarter to apply to CALS. Now, there are some caveats. They ask a question on the app like, tell us about any experience you have related to agriculture. If you have no idea that that question exists and you're not ready for the question, right, then that could be a problem because they use that as a filter function, right? Like it's optional actually. But as you can imagine, like it's not actually optional, that they are using that as a filter. If you don't respond, that's a problem. If you do respond and you say something of no value, that's a problem. So you need to be aware of what they're looking for. But if you know what they're looking for and you're applying as a bio student and you're passionate about bio and you've decided that's the most strategic way to apply, it would be more strategic to apply bio CALS than bio arts and sciences if you live in the state of New York. You also see that CALS is a very, in my opinion, strange college. I mean, they have communications and they have public health and they have applied economics in there. So it's a very diverse college with a wide variety of programs that, in my opinion, honestly, I don't understand exactly how they all fit under this umbrella. And so because of that, they get a lot of strange, like applicants that don't probably fit with agriculture and life sciences because of the different programs that they offer. They get these apps and I think they're very quickly gone. There's a certain type of person they're looking for at CALS. And so you really do need to fit under that umbrella, even though sometimes you look at programs and you think, oh, I could do applied economics there. Well, it's a different type of applied economics in CALS. So you have to be aware of that if you're going to be successful. Human ecology is, again, a very unique college at Cornell. The director of admissions for this college, his name is Daryl. I know him well. He's a very unique individual. It's a very small college and he makes most of the decisions himself. And he makes atypical decisions because he has been there for a long time and he has like a real beat on what exactly the dean is looking for in human ecology. So even statistically, when you look at the numbers, you think the students aren't as strong, but they're like all over the mission of human ecology. They have a fashion management program, right? Like where they require a whole portfolio. Those are the students that are highly successful, where you can match your experience with their mission. If you can do that, it's very accessible. You don't have to have perfect grades or perfect SAT scores. It's a very accessible college, but you do need the content to be successful in human ecology. Our architecture and planning, this is really portfolio based, right? So if you have a art portfolio or you have an architecture urban planning portfolio, this is a really powerful pathway because you can show your work. And again, when you're forced into showing your work at such a high level, in my mind, it's a great opportunity because most students are going to struggle with this. They're not going to have prepared for this for years on end. They're planning on applying. They just sat down. If you are thinking about this stuff in advance, portfolio work can really move the needle in your favor and overcome a lot of statistical issues. Hotel administration, this is probably one of the most famous programs at Cornell, mostly because of the fact that the Statler, which is the hotel, is actually on campus. So the students are working in the hotel. They're running the hotel. All the business operations, all the hospitality operations are being run by students. And so they have this very hands-on experience. Do you have to have hotel experience in advance? Yes, you do. Like you can't just say, I want to work in hotels because of course, everybody who's applying there wants to work in hotels. Imagine you're the admissions person, right? Like everybody wants to work in hotels. What would you do if you had to, tighten the pool a little bit? You'd say, well, Let's see the ones who actually worked in hotels, or let's see the ones that have a perspective about working in hotels, right? So the level of expectation gets ramped up in your engagement, especially when you have these specific college types like hotel administration. But I will tell you, the students love it there. Really challenging program, but the students have fantastic experiences immediately upon graduation. And then we get to ILR. ILR, in my opinion, is the most accessible of the colleges at Cornell. The first thing to note is that the ILR stands for Industrial Labor Relations. Now, that's like a mouthful, but if you look it up and you like read the website and really look at the course offerings, what you find is that ILR, Industrial Labor Relations, is really simply an investigation into how do we work? How do we work as people, as human beings in the United States, in an industrialized nation? Like, what is it about? How do we function as workers? What are the rights? How are they protected? How do we solve big problems? And when you think about work, like, work is everything. Like, what is not work? You know what I mean? Like, everybody's working in something. So when you think about ILR, a lot of people say, oh, I don't want to do ILR. That's industrial labor relations. That sounds rather specific. But actually, it's not. It's rather broad. I mean, people go into government, law, health. I mean, you'd be surprised. ILR is incredibly flexible, but you need to have a perspective on maybe you're interested in health. Well, okay, then we need to think about health through the lens of industrial labor relations. Can we do that? If we can, then we have a possibility of an entry point. If we can't, then of course we don't, because if we don't believe the story, they won't believe the story. But ILR is by far, in my opinion, the most accessible college. I have been successful taking students that I think probably have never heard of industrial labor relations before they met me and turning them to an ILR students rather quickly because of the flexibility of what ILR is and how I'm able to apply it to a wide variety of experiences for students at the high school level. And then we have the Brooks School of Public Policy. Again, Cornell is such a complex place. This school kind of functions under other schools, like there's colleges and there's schools. But you can study public policy through a wide variety of places. You can do it through ILR. You can do it through the Brooks School. You can do it through arts and sciences. So it's important to understand, like, well, if you can do it through all these different areas, John, what's unique about Brooks, right? Like, if I'm going to identify myself as a potential Brooks School of Public Policy student, how's that different than if I studied public policy through ILR? You need to know that. And so what we do is we sit down and we break it all down and we say, like, what is Brooks versus ILR? How's policy being conceived through the classes, through the research, through the faculty? And once you have that and you can communicate it effectively, you have a huge advantage against other students that don't understand this. And of course, Cornell is one of the rare schools that requires you to understand all of this. And because many students don't, if you really spend some time understanding Cornell compared to other people, you can really move the needle. So I feel very fortunate all the time. Of all the Ivy League schools or Ivy Plus schools I could have worked at, I'm fortunate to be at Cornell because the complexity of it gives me ways to think about how to position students and give them significant advantages. Okay, I believe that was, essays. That's right. So we'll talk just very briefly about essays. Cornell has one universal prompt. Last year, it was as follows. We all contribute to and are influenced by the communities that are meaningful to us. Share how you have been shaped by one of the communities you belong to. Remember that this essay is about you and your lived experience. Define community in the way that is most meaningful to you. Some examples of community you might choose from are family, school, shared interest, virtual, local, global, cultural. So you can see here that this question is rather diverse, and there's lots of different ways you can attack it. But this question is important, of course, because every single college at Cornell is using that question. And so to that end, you need to understand it. But then again, it's really not the most important question because it's not the college question, right? The deans and directors of admission of each of the colleges, they write the questions. When I was at Cornell, I wrote it. When I left, my replacement, Irene, she rewrote the question. It's kind of a rite of passage, if you will, but to make your mark on, like, what is it that you want to bring into this college, into this class? And so that's really where you want to focus. Of course, this question is important because all the questions are important, but the college-specific question is really where you want to be. Okay.
John, done?
All done. I see I lost my
that's okay. When you get through all the Cornell different colleges, I bet there's a lot of parents don't have that detail. One thing kind of amazes me, I want you also spend some time to talk about that is, Based on the conversation me and Allison and our team talk with the parents, they are so limited, meaning they always asking, oh, computer science and bioscience and data science, economic. So the parents are very limited, think about how much you can help your kids, how much you can help you. I always mentioned before the beginning, I said, the parents' knowledge is the ceiling. It's the bamboo ceiling of the child's growth, right? If the parents don't have the knowledge, then the child doesn't have the soil ground to know more, to be curiosity more. So I feel parents, one thing you can do is broaden you can see there's many, many different ways to working with the consultant like John to have a better of understanding. Maybe there's a different kind of type of field you can use as prospective major to apply yourself to building an evidence. And parents often don't have that knowledge. So, often we tell them to go to the website, take a look under art and science, what they have, going to business school, looking for the concentration, what they have. Do you have any advice to give the parents that tool and also the knowledge so they can be ahead of their child, to help their child to take a look? Let a child, you ask them, I often see you have a meeting with the child, ask them, I don't know. They give you 10 of I don't know. Then you don't know how conversation is going to move forward because they have no idea. It's because they never was talked to. They don't have that kind of environment or in the family. The parents know enough to guide the kids, have that conversation, have them take a look together. Every single one of them, I bet, have a ability of doing research. Then that's one thing you can do as a family event to show your kids. So do you have any advice in that, because you can see a lot of people don't know the detail of Cornell's different colleges. What about other school? Do you have any good suggestions?
Well, I always think that once you have a direction, everything's a lot easier, right? So
Yes.
the challenge, of course, is identifying a direction in a world of possibilities, right? What I always focus on is trying to get to see that spark, from a student, and that's a curiosity spark. And so what we generally do is there's two different ways that I go about doing it to try and get students thinking. And I think as a family, you could start to do this right now. The first thing I always ask them is, tell me about the things that you do right now that you find, interesting. And so, they might say, I love to play tennis. I love to volunteer at a soup kitchen. I love to, tutor. And so, okay, great. Now if you let's just say for argument's sake, you're tutoring, right? And you go to an organization every day and you tutor. Many of the students think that is just tutoring. It's education. I have an experience here, and it's an educational experience. I'm educating young people, and that's what it is. And I think the first challenge for parents is to challenge their students to recognize that that's not the case. That when they're tutoring, they could look at it from that lens. They could say, I really love and I'm curious about how to make people learn in a more effective way, or I'm really curious about how to get them interested in a topic. That might be obviously illustrative of your interest in education, right? But you might also say, a student might come home and say, "How was your day?" And they might say, "Oh, it was great. I love going there." And you might say, "Why?" And they say, I really feel at home. Like I have friends there, and I feel like we're really creative." And so now, are we talking about tutoring people, or are we talking about the culture of the organization? Are we talking about the organizational structure, the leadership opportunity in front of them, the communication between them? And so what we do is we start to ask, how can we investigate the things that they are doing now that they enjoy through different lenses that they aren't anticipating? Maybe we can investigate your tutoring experience through the lens of economics. Is this economically feasible? Is this a good business model? That's a possibility. Maybe we can look at it through the lens of communications and ask, organizationally, do we have good communication protocols? Or maybe if we're talking about marketing, and we want to increase our chances of getting more students, what does communication look like from that regard? So there's lots of different ways to think about students' experiences. And I would challenge students or parents to start to ask their kids about their experiences and not just put them in the box of, well, this is newspaper club, so this must be about writing, or this is math club, this must be about math. A lot of times there's organizational management, there's communications, there's leadership, there's culture, there's policy. All that stuff is existing in many of their experiences, and opening their eyes would be part one. That makes sense so far, Sophia?
Yeah. Yes. And also add on, like you said, I saw you during the meetings often going to the website together with the student to show them, they never know, show them what's the concentration. If you want to go to Watron, then what is concentration? And out of that concentration, you will tell them what's more competitive, what's the least competitive. They can be, if they are not against or hate it, then maybe they can spend time to work together with you, guide them to building the evidence you are hoping them to gain.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, and so that first idea was like, going through and looking through your experiences and kind of asking questions. The second is to let them, force them, of course, in the beginning, but then let them have their curiosity be the driving force. So, my dad, when I was a child, used to say, read the newspaper, John, read the newspaper. And I never did, of course, because as a kid, you don't care what's going on in the world because, you're focused on the things that are right in front of you. As I look back, of course, you recognize it's really hard to find how you position yourself, what your place is without having a clue what's going on, right? And you kind of have to know that. And so what I often challenge students to do is simply highlight, you're going to read, listen, you have to read a blog or a newspaper or some local news. Give me something so you have a sense of what's going on. And if it's even remotely interesting to you, like why did they vote against that low income housing project? Or I really am interested in the financial returns of Bitcoin, whatever it is, highlight it, right? And now we can look at it. We can say, oh, you're interested in the financial returns of Bitcoin? Well, what areas of academia might I have to investigate to understand Bitcoin? Well, yeah, of course, finance, right? But there's a decentralization aspect to it. So you could think about that from a variety of perspectives. That could be technology, right? That could be sociology. You could think about it from a government perspective, right? This is decentralized finance. How's government impacting it? So the point is that what I do is I start with a topic that at the very least, there's some level of curiosity. And then I start to show them different lenses and shades from which to approach that topic. And usually through that conversation, whether it's, letting them investigate a question about their own experience, like let's an economics question about their tutoring, or letting them identify curiosities and then showing them, as Sophia said, now I might say, well, you identified Bitcoin. Let's go to Wharton's website and let's take a look at the distribution of majors in business. And let's ask ourselves, if I were to investigate economics through the lens of social governance versus the lens of finance, which one's more interesting? Which one have better narrative value? Which one do you want to do, right? And have a conversation around that. And if you do that well, I see students change when they recognize that they have the ability to observe the world around them, develop a question or an inquiry, and then start to use a filter, a lens from which to approach it. That's the hardest part. If you don't know how to approach a question, you have no lens, you don't know, like there's a million different ways to approach a question. If you have no idea how to do that, most people just stop, right? Like, oh my gosh, this is overwhelming. But that's what we do. We give you the lens, the perspective of how to approach it. And then once you do that, the world feels accessible.
Yeah. Thank you, John. Before I saw some very good questions. Tonight, I think the question quality are good. Before that, can you just give me like a couple minutes? I will have to do some job to do. Allison, give me some job to do. I have to introduce the internship program.
Of course, yeah, go for it.
Yes. So IvyCompass, we have an internship program that's like 8 weeks. I mean, later on, I would love to hear your perspective. I know you have a different kind of type of emphasis on the research and also on the internship. But if you do it right, could be enhance the evidence. Okay, so this internship you can see from different field. We have a mentorship, we have engineering, consulting, fashion, you name it, nonprofit. They all start working with a startup company and usually lasts for 8 weeks. That 8 weeks, if it's under John's guidance, I feel if you have a purposely get into those kind of type of relationship and also experience can be impactful. But if you don't, just randomly, then could be just waste of time. And obviously, John, we also have a leadership relationship with the Lumineer, and they have research program. If you just go into the basic one, it's 2,990 without published paper. Also, I know John have his own opinion about if you need a published paper or not published paper, but they have a different tier of relationship you can get into. But if you doesn't matter if you have a relationship with us or not, if you're interested in this two program, reach out to us. We'll be happy to connecting you with the resource we have. Okay, so I'm going to leave this page on. If you find information John provided today, because very often parents are asking us, there's so many information given to me. There's so many agencies out there. We are so poised, confused. We don't know who to choose, because I don't know who's good, who's bad. What about if I'm getting to the relationship and I'm happy about? It's not just about the money. It's about time. My kids doesn't have second 9-year, ninth grade to go over with. So they are very, very confused. They don't know how to choose. But guess what? I think based on your social experience, based on your business experience, you should be able to tell who has the concrete knowledge and also clear mind what they're doing. And obviously you can tell John is one of them, know what he's doing. And he's very intelligent, so he will be able 2 or 3 levels at least higher than the student, able to really guide those capable students to even thinking deeper and broad. If you would like to have a 30 minutes free consultation with John, asking some questions and get to know him even more, you're welcome to scan the barcode on the right-hand side, and me and Allison will follow up with you after this meeting to help you arrange that kind of type of meeting with John. But if you see that you're not ready, you just wanted to still continue shopping and get to know more information, then you can scan the barcode on the left-hand side. Then we will be bring you to our website, not website, the WeChat group. You can continue, stay with us, and continue learning and see which one you wanted to be connecting with. Okay, I'm going to leave this page on. Now I just wanted to go into some of the questions. If you want to open your mic, have a conversation with John, ask a question directly. Sometimes you feel, just writing the question was not enough. You can raise your hand. Towards the end, I will give some space and time to unmute you and give you opportunity to ask a question directly if you interested in that. Okay, let me go through some of the questions, John. I will read it to you, and then you can answer those questions as your fits. Number 1 question coming from Jean Lee. In Cornell, do they prioritize students who indicated intended major to select the class first, like I can more easily to meet with the major requirement? I don't know if you...
No, I would say not in any case. That the only area where they put you in the major would be engineering, and even in that area, there's a lot of switching because there would be like no industrial engineers. So the answer is no, that the course selection is not incumbent upon identifying intended major earlier. That doesn't have any impact.
Okay. All right. Okay. Okay. Next question from River. As a former admission director of Cornell, which one do you value more, summer research or summer paid job?
It depends. I would say most of the time research, but it really depends on what it is what story we're trying to tell and what experience. I mean, a paid job, like for example, I had a young lady who, her parents owned a restaurant, and the ecosystem of that restaurant, we talked about every single part of that restaurant, the dishwashers, the zeroing out the cash register, issues with staff, her evolution through the experience. So like, there was a lot, and that was all built around kind of organizational management, and that worked fantastically and probably was better than a research experience, depending on the academic area. That sometimes a summer job is not connected to their academic area. Like, I got a summer job working at, Frosty Cone or something. I think that's valuable, of course, to work and to earn money as a young person, but it really has no impact on college admissions unless I can connect it to an area of academia.
Yeah, so it's all about going back to what you said in the beginning is what direction, what prospective major you're going to choose. That will determine the things is relevant or not relevant. If it's not relevant, then it's no use, right?
Yes.
Impact less. Okay, next question from Jean. What is the difference of econ between the business school and art and science school? I think a lot of people asking us that. It mentioned as example, but no detail were given or shared. So can you tell what's the difference?
Yeah. So, some majors function as like bridge majors, meaning they just exist in multiple spaces. Economics is an example. Computer science is an example, where economics is in arts and sciences and in business. Computer science is in arts and sciences and in engineering. So in those cases, there's just generally a different philosophy. In economics, on the business side, it's very much practical, applied economics, whereas on the arts and sciences, generally it's more economic theory. Sometimes the way that I try to bridge it, so like if I have students that want to apply both ways, I think about it as, if you look at all the majors on the arts and on the business side there's always this like public governance economics oriented storyline at almost every university. They have something like that, or in Cornell, et cetera. That works for business and for arts and sciences. You can be successful in both ways there. Whereas, if you put something like finance, right, that is very clearly going to be in the business college as not part of like theory, but more applied economics. So generally it's applied versus theoretical. You can, on the computer science side, in case anybody's wondering, generally it's more hardware oriented in the engineering side and more software oriented in the arts and sciences side, more calc based on the engineering side, more linear algebra based on the arts and sciences side.
Okay, yeah, there's also different. Yeah. Okay, the next question is asking by River again. Also, we are a letter of recommendation from a university professor who guided my summer lab research, wet lab research, have a strong weight in the admission process.
The short answer is probably no. I mean, of course, it always depends. I think there's if you think about recs, there's teacher recs and supplemental recs. The teacher recs are required, supplemental recs are not. When you're thinking about supplemental recs, they should be purposeful, and you should have a sense of what it is you're hoping that's going to be communicated through this rec. So, when you think about like a lab mentor that might be writing a letter of rec, you have to ask yourself, like, what could this human being say about me? And let's just say, for argument's sake, that you are a fantastic researcher and you found something about Alzheimer's that nobody else found, which is very atypical because there's millions of people studying it, right? But lots of kids in Long Island, New York City, they're studying Alzheimer's. Most of the readers don't believe. It's just like noise to most of them because they don't really believe that something substantive is happening. It's just more of a research skill set checkbox. If that's what the letter of rec is going to be, right? Like, I had John in the lab. He was great. He's really on time and punctual, and he did everything I told him to do, blah, 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 blah. That's useless. I mean, we know that you did it. Like, at highly selective schools, they're going to need more. Now, if they say something a leg further and they say, John came up with maybe didn't find something, but had a unique perspective that led us to a different approach. Now we're starting to talk about something, right? Adding something to the storyline. I would say, in many of the research experiences, I worked with Lumiere and other companies. Many of them sell like the recommendation as part of the research experience. And, honestly, for most of my students, I tell them I don't want it. It's like, it feels to me like raising a big red flag, saying I had an adult support me through this. Now, there's nothing wrong with having an adult support you through this. Like, we all need mentorship to investigate things, right? To understand how to investigate things. But, I like to focus on research that's accessible enough that the reader can believe that the student did it without a research mentor. Now, once in a while, there's unique students in STEM areas. They're doing some unique stuff that, like, they do need research mentors, and they're at such a level that it's okay. Like, it's not really detracting by having this mentor because the student is so strong across the board that the reader kind of believes everything. But a lot of times that having that mentor feels like a detracting from the student, and, it's like starts to, how do you assign the value of the research? It's the same thing when you have multiple writers, right, on a publication. How do I assign the value, or group competition? How do I assign the value? All those things are real conversations for college admissions officers where they don't assign the value to group competitions or research-led mentorships where it's not obvious that the student was the driving force. So I'd say on a case-by-case basis, it can be very valuable, but you just don't want it to be that typical research mentorship letter that basically says they show up on time, they follow directions, and they got through the project, which is what usually happens.
Yeah. Okay. Case-by-case basis. Okay. Next question is very long. From CL. If a female student is more or less equally interested in both area, math and finance, has a good track record in both these areas, in terms of chance of getting admitted to a good top university, what priority order would you recommending among the following three pathways? First pathway explicitly expressed in terms of double major. Number 2, use math as a major through other area will be mentioned too. Use finance as a major through the other area will be mentioned too. Which one you think is a better path?
Well, the thing you have to understand is that first you start with what college type are we considering here, right? So if we say like a math finance major is either it's a unique program or it's a double major across colleges, which is generally not super easy to do. Now, of course, the finance students have very strong math backgrounds, but you'd be surprised that there's probably not that many students getting double majors in math and finance because they're separate college types, depending on the university. Okay, so you start with that. Now, in regards to like which one would be better, the business school would very clearly be better for a super strong female math because there's just way less super strong female math students. On the business side, if you look like first of all, business will be male dominated. And so like there's that kind of macro male domination. If you think of arts and sciences, like yes, female math will be male dominated, right? I'm sorry, math will be male dominated. There'll be less females in math, but in arts and sciences as a whole, right? It's the college type as a whole, which is the business function. There will be a good distribution of females and males, right? Because there's lots of majors that lean towards both. Whereas in the business side, there's not going to be very many majors that are leaning towards females at all, or even concentrations. So if you give me a choice with a strong female student, I'm definitely going business. We've had a lot of success with females applying to Wharton, applying to MIT under engineering, lots of success in that area. Whereas female arts and sciences, math would be fine, like math, physics, like those areas would be, but you're hoping that the admissions officer is focusing on the fact that, and they should, I would say in 85, 90% of situations they would, focus on the underrepresentation in that specific area. But a lot of times, kind of from a business mentality of enrollment, they're not as focused on like, do I have to have exactly this many females in math? As long as I have this many females in the arts and sciences college, I'm okay. So I lean towards the business school as the more strategic pathway.
Thank you. Thank you for the answer. Okay. The next question coming from Kathleen is also asking, what is the difference between reflected computer science in art and science versus computer science in engineering school?
Yeah, and that's what I said earlier. Basically that, as it relates to what you do in high school, it's really not different. I mean, you would do the same things, but the way the experience of it would be different in that it would be leaning more towards software and linear algebra on the arts and sciences side and leaning more towards hardware and hardware and calculus on the computer engineering side. Some schools call computer science the major in engineering. Some of them call it computer engineering and differentiate it. So it really have to look from school to school, but most of the time it's software versus hardware, calc versus linear algebra.
All right, next question from Sarah. I think I wanted to also emphasize your question. And let me read the question first. Is that easier to change your major in Cornell? First of all, is that easy to change your major in Cornell? Can you apply for a less competitive major, then transfer to a more competitive major? And there's a lot of even question the term. I think there's a misunderstanding. So John, can you list what is transfer and what is declare? I think a lot of concept even it's not correct. So we wanted to clarify that.
Yeah. So, if I apply as an economics student to the College of Arts and Sciences, right? I apply, I get in, I go to my advisor and I say to my advisor, what's my major? They would look in the system and they'd say, you're a freshman, John, you're undecided. I'd say, what did I put in my app? And they'd say economics. Okay. So now I'm in arts and sciences and I'm an aspiring economics major, right? Now, let's just say, and maybe economics is not the least competitive major to get into. Let's just say we choose anthropology then, right? Like I applied as arts and sciences. Maybe I'm actually interested in economics, but I applied as an anthropology student. And now I am an intended anthropology student in the College of Arts and Sciences. All right. So the first would be, John, I applied as anthropology, but I don't want to be an anthropology student. I want to be an economics student. What is that? That is not transferring majors. You never were an anthropology major, and you never were an economics major. You simply were an undecided arts and sciences student that applied, that identified themselves as likely to be anthropology when they made the decision. And now, when it's time to declare your major, second semester of your sophomore year, you're going to declare economics. You haven't transferred anything, you haven't changed anything, you haven't filled out any forms, you simply are declaring something different than what you identified on your app. That It's very typical, happens all the time. 50, 60% of students are declaring something different than what they put on their application. I apply as an anthropology student, and I now want to become a finance student. Well, finance doesn't exist in arts and sciences, right? Economics does as a major, but finance does not. Finance is a concentration in the business college. If I really want to do that, I might say, well, I'll just take economics. Then I don't have to worry. I just declare economics. But if I want finance and I want it in the business college because I really want this kind of practical application finance experience, well, now I need to do what I refer to as, they all refer to as an internal transfer. It is a transfer. And it's internal, of course, because you're already at Cornell, but you're in the arts and sciences college, and now you want to go to the business college. That's an application. You have to fill out an application. You have to meet with an advisor. There's a bunch of prerequisites you're going to have to take. The advisor might say, yeah, like we're thinking about admitting you, but we want to see you take that class. You need to get a B. Like they'll do things to kind of make it a little bit more challenging for you. The admit rate of internal transfer from college to college is about 70%. So most students are able to internal transfer, but it's hard to internal transfer into small specialty college. Like, business is small, so it's hard to internal transfer in. Hotel, hard to internal transfer in because they have a certain number of spots for the hotel students. Usually it's hard to internal transfer into engineering because of course sequencing. It's a lot easier to internal transfer into arts and sciences as the catch-all college. It's broad and has a lot of stuff. Now, the thing is, even if you transfer, let's say you're in ILR and you transfer into arts and sciences, you can usually do that. Sometimes, though, you won't be able to get the major you want, right? So like, for example, I want to declare computer science. Well, each department has their own requirements. So it's not that the school will say no, but the computer science department might say you need to get a C in these 3 math classes. And if you go get a C minus, now you're not going to be a computer science student. So that's how they manage enrollment. They manage it by saying departmentally, you're going to decide what the requirements are. And if too many students are able to meet your requirement and you don't have enough people to teach them, then next year you just make the requirement harder. Instead of C, it's C+, and C+ is B-, and that's usually what happens. So the answer to your question is internal transfer is doable, 70%, but it's a process. So it is important with all my students at Cornell. I do try to get them to the right college type. I don't like throw them into some random college and then just assume that we will get them to the other college that they want later, even though they usually can. I want to get them to a college that if something goes wrong and they're not able to internal transfer, that they're in a spot that they can be successful, get a degree that they want. And that's always a question for people. Like, if I get stuck in ILR, right, and I can't get out, is this a degree I want? Most of the time when they learn about it, they find, yeah, I'm okay with that. And they're willing to take on the risk of that internal transfer. But most of the time with my students, there's no internal transfer. We're talking about just declaring a different major than what they actually wrote down on their application.
Okay, this is so important. John, can you allow me to use Chinese? Maybe just quickly summarize what you said, because also very confused a lot of the families.
Sure.
Okay, 那我用中文再总结一下哈，因为这个是太重要了。同样的，跟我们在中国大陆所上学的这个一些概念是不一样的哈，不一样的。那个 transfer 这个词是这样的，如果你是在一个对的 college 里面，因为我们说这个综合性大学通常有3个 college，一个是 business， 一个是 engineer 和 art and science。art and science 是最大的，它那个数量和录取的人数是最多的，里面文科理科都有 language， 有 physics， 有 computer science， 有 data science， 然后有这个 music， 有 art， 都在这里面。如果你是对的 college， 所以第一个要做决定就是你要申请哪个 college， 你要申请 business college 还是 engineer college 或者 art and science。一旦你进了对的 college 里面，在里面相对来讲它是不叫 transfer， 就是说你进去用一个 major，像这样说的，你高中是用一个 major intended 去进入这个大学的 college 里面。在这个 college 里面以后，一旦进去了以后，你实际上是在大学的2年级就 declare 你真正想落在哪个 major 上面，所以那个词不叫 transfer， 而叫落，所以就会有 strategy， 就会有没有一个 more competitive 和一个 less competitive 的这个 major 是有的啊，就像刚刚他说的这个 computer science 和这个bioscience 都是比较这个 competitive 的，好学生特别多的。那有没有一个相对来讲 less competitive 的这个 prospective major 是有的，所以那个词它叫就用的非常的准确，它叫 declare major。 那是很容易的，就在 within the college 里面。但是如果你想从 Art and Science transfer 到 Engineer School，那个叫 transfer，因为是 college 之间的 transfer，哪怕在一个大的 university 里面，从一个 college transfer 到另外一个 college，它也是个新的 application，你重新要准备你的这些 evidence。如果从 Art and Science transfer 到 Business School，因为它的 school 很小，所以它可能没有名额，所以在 college 之间的 transfer。这个词叫 transfer，如果在 within 的这个 college 里面，它不叫 transfer，它叫 declare 啊，所以这个我也想用中文这个再重新总结一下刚刚这样分享的这个概念也非常重要，因为很多家庭我们在工作过程当中发现大家都是很 confused，都非常害怕去选一个 prospect major，因为他们担心。最后小孩子会落在这样的一个 major 上面，然后学完了出来找不着工作，所以其实不用担心，在高中期间你所选择用来申请的这个 prospective major 是不会真正的一定的，有的可能就是真正的，有的可能就不是的。在大学里面，只要在对的 college 里面，你 declare 是很容易的事情啊。OK，all right，thank you, John, for that. Next one, next question is how competitive environmental engineering?
I would say, a lot of the environmental engineers are really kind of coinciding with civil engineering in many ways. Like a lot of those stories we do, like water quality, air pollution, waste management, sustainable infrastructure. I would say it's a good narrative. It's a good story, not super, super. I mean, all the engineering fields are somewhat competitive, but I would say amongst the engineering areas, not super, super competitive and it's good narrative value.
OK，他刚刚意思就是说，这是一个很好的中间的这个 competitive 用来做这个故事和提供 evidence 来这个增强自己的这个 evidence 的是蛮好的一个选择哈。下一个 from J，Can a student at Cornell choose major within the college he was admitted into, or can he choose major across the colleges?
Mostly just the major, mostly just the college you were admitted into. There are some integrated programs and sometimes you can get double degrees across the colleges, but I would not expect that to happen because it's more atypical.
All right. Yes. Thank you. Thank you, John. Okay, next question from Z. If my male student is passionate about computer science, USACO platinum level, and using AI to help other, like developed several APP to support children with autism, should he apply for multidisciplinary major like CS plus public health? Would this path make a admission process even more competitive? Which college he should apply in Cornell? Thanks.
The truth is it's a challenging conversation. Like I'm sure we could come to a conclusion, right? But like we wouldn't be able to figure it out. It takes probably 45, 50 minutes of conversation, right? To come to this conclusion of how to go about doing it. I mean, I had a student 2 years ago who was a very clearly computer science student, created an app for meal delivery for this, volunteer experience he had. He applied, I forget where he applied ED because he wasn't my student there. He got rejected. And when I looked at him, I thought, I don't, I think the student's better. USACO platinum level, that's pretty good. But like the student I saw, even though a great student, I didn't see the quality that we need to compete in that area. So I literally, for ED2, when I worked with him, we turned the entire story. I said, pretend you don't know how to make an app. Like, who would you have to talk to? Who would you have to interview? Let's imagine this is an organizational management story. And he got in, because so the short answer is like, yeah, CS and public health can be super competitive, like super competitive. Does that mean you shouldn't do it? No, it depends on kind of like what else. Like I think you have a nice foundation there with some actual objective achievement, right? So that's a nice foundation to start from. Do I like the idea of using AI to develop an app to support children with autism? Maybe, I guess it depends on like what the unique perspective is about the app, why autism, like all the personal connections to all that would be super important. At face value, like if there's no connection to that, to autism, and it's not like, then it feels, like I don't love that idea. I like the objective achievement as a foundation, but it feels a little impersonal. If there's a connection to it, then maybe. So I'd say it's a longer conversation. That's the type of thing we'd have to sit down and chat about to really know which college type. But if you asked me right now, I would say engineering college, if you're going to apply as computer science, would be much, much easier because everyone you're competing with there is STEM, as opposed to saying, starting in a category of, well, we don't really need any more computer science, arts and sciences students, which is really where they start from when they start reading in that area.
Okay, thanks. Thank you, John. Okay, so next question is from Sherry, saying, is this generally accurate? For student wants job on Wall Street, it is important to get into the right clubs, no matter which college in Cornell, be in Dyson, School of Art and Science, or LIR.
I don't know that to be true. I'm not saying it's wrong. It makes sense that you would be in the right clubs. I mean, you know, I think it's not my specialty to admittedly, to tell students how to get to Wall Street. My own personal opinion is that you do exactly what I do when you try to apply for college. You think about what the needs are of the position you're applying for, you match it with your experience, and you illustrate a perspective, an ethos, a theme, a brand that you can communicate effectively in an interview that says, if you hire me, I have a perspective that I can share that can be added, not I'm like a cog in a wheel, right? That's the way I see it. But as it relates to like your question, it seems reasonable. I really don't know if there are specific clubs and organizations to have, you know, nice pathways or connections to finance jobs. I have to imagine there probably are, but I'm not 100% aware of that.
Okay. One of the parents asking, when you're sharing your spreadsheets, what does means +1 and -1?
That meant whether they overperformed by a category. So I have different categories, basically by admit rates, say 0 to 10% and 10 to 20% and 20 to 30%. Those are way bigger than the categories, but those are the categories. And so when I say +1, it means they overperformed a category, or if they -1, they underperformed a category.
Yeah, generally speaking, John usually have a benchmarking when his student coming down to 11th grade. When he does the benchmarking, he will usually predict, also tell the student the chance, what school they might have a chance to get into, 10%, 20%, or 15%. And so when John does that, I feel you're pretty much like very accurate, always project very right. But sometimes the result even better than you projected. You know,
Yeah.
you have to be a little bit more conservative. And sometimes the student somehow also maybe underperform what you projected. That's what that means.
And I'll also add, you know, I do think that I think it's an important part of what we do. You know, I think of course there are other good consultants out there, and many of them can help build a student or a compelling story. They're smart themselves, and they see a smart student and they can build that story. But I'm pretty confident that most of them have no clue whether a student's getting in or not. Like at the when I say they don't know, like they don't really know the chances of a student getting into Cornell versus Columbia. They don't really understand the difference in that in the review process. I would say, I mean, it doesn't necessarily, this process of benchmarking really is for the families. But like I know if they're getting in. And very rarely am I surprised by a decision. I do it mostly for the family, so they understand like kind of why I'm saying what I'm doing. Those different 13 different metrics that I'm using. You know, I kind of do it intuitively and have a sense pretty quickly, but I write it all out so a family can make an informed decision and feel like they know why they're making the decision.
Yeah. Okay. For me, question is, can student major in biology in Cal's still able to apply for medical school after graduate? The course they learned in Cal's are from biology major in art and science. Question.
The answer is yes, you can major in biology. Yes, you can go to medical school. The final question is not exactly that. There's overlap. There are some classes that are biology classes for Cals, and there are some classes that are biology classes for arts and sciences, and there are many classes that are overlap for both.
Okay, this question come up again from Lisa. Is the student gets into public policy college, how likely to transfer to engineer college or vice versa? How about taking classes from 2 different colleges? Is any limitation?
There is a limitation. You cannot register for classes outside of your college type without special permission to do so. So you're in that college type. That's where you are. As it relates to like transferring, it's an internal transfer. It's a very complex thing. It's hard to explain. I mean, there literally was, when I was at Cornell, it doesn't exist anymore. They created it while I was there. The university created an office of internal transfer, and the college directors of admissions got all angry because they're like, what do you mean? You're going to facilitate students transferring out of our colleges at the university level? That just really makes our job a lot harder. So there was a lot of arguments, and they shut the internal transfer office down. So like there's like this tension, right? The university wants to facilitate it, but the colleges don't really. Now, in regards to your specific question, I would say if I had to guess, if I give you a percentage, I'd say you probably have a 30% chance of transferring from policy to engineering mostly what they'll probably do is they'll say, well, oh, you want to transfer? Great. The class that you want to take, the intro level class that's necessary, is only in the fall, and you're trying to transfer in the spring. So now you have to wait at least a whole year so that you can take it in the fall. And then, it's like they throw an obstacle like that up, and then basically you're sitting there saying, well, now I'm going to graduate an entire year later, or I could just declare physics, or I could declare computer science, or I could declare math and arts and sciences right now. So I would say more likely than not, you wouldn't transfer from public policy to engineering. It'd be easier to do something. If you're doing policy through arts and sciences, it'd be easier to just declare something else. If you're doing it through the Brooks School, then it would make no sense to me really to apply to the Brooks School and then hope to plan to transfer to engineering. Like I just wouldn't do that with a student.
Thanks, John. Thank you. This is long. It's almost like it's expression more than question. I have a 6th grader who is strong in math, have earned regional swimming champions. I really appreciate Sophia's insights on the importance of parenting growth through self-education. I'm currently trying to explore the college planning system in more efficient and informed way so I can better prepare my son's future college application journey. Can you please share any resource or guide that I can start with to educating myself and support him along the way? By the way, I have to purchase your book, John, your book. And thank you for such valuable resource. So the book is a good start.
Thank you. Well, I appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, I wrote that book admittedly early when I started consulting. It doesn't have the page methodology or Morganelli method stuff because I created that after I wrote the book. I mean, the truth is, it's hard to get your arms around this stuff because every student is different and every college is different. They call it different things with different names and different access points. It is complicated. I mean, it's a complicated thing. I would say the truth is, probably the best thing you could do is probably go to ivycompass.com and just sit down and listen to all of the different webinars that they've done. I think mine are the best, of course, but of course there are also great people that have talked about different topics like summer programming and just things that I don't maybe to focus on as much. I think that I would watch videos. YouTube videos are probably the best way to do it to get your arms around it. And then you want to have questions, right? Like certain things you're going to identify as curiosities and your wonderings, and then you're going to want to have a conversation with somebody who can actually respond to those directly, because it's very hard to take a specific question and like Google it. AI is not bad these days, but again, you get very generalized responses. Sophia and I chat all the time, and she gives me great feedback as well about my presentation. And a lot of the feedback is, John, this stuff is complicated, right? Like we have to figure out how to communicate this more effectively and efficiently. And I've spent 5-6 years thinking about it, and we've been very successful in regards to getting students to college. But it's really hard to communicate this briefly, concisely, effectively, efficiently because of the nuance and the complexity of it. So I would just, inform yourself with videos from trusted sources, and then draft questions and ask trusted sources. And from there, if you do those two things, you're probably, heads and tails ahead of most people, because most people don't think about this until they literally sit down to apply.
Yes. Thank you. That's very good answer. I just want to emphasize 2 things, Irene. I'm going to use Chinese, okay? So I can explain in different ways. A lot of parents, I feel, either they think their kids' grades are very good, so they don't understand clearly there's so many other aspects, the knowledge. 想说的是隔行如隔山，这真的是一个 profession. You have to respect it. You have to have 敬畏之心。不要认为like all the college consultants out there are liars and they just take my money and don't do anything. No, there's a good one out there. Very small percentage of people out there, and John's one of them. And obviously, I'm hoping IvyCompass team are one of them. Meaning we're truly here to do our best to give you what we think will be enhance your experience. The entire team here are supporting, John and also other type of resource to make sure your kids getting what they needed to become better person. Ultimately, I think we are thinking if your kids become smarter and also better person, more of driven, more of future oriented, have a vision, then your kids will be one of the person be choosing to those top tier school. So it's all about 以终为始. as a parents, if you can learning more, listening to more, what they're looking for. It's not about 功利或包装. It's about based on what they're looking for. We go backward to thinking what we need to do from the 6th grade, 5th grade, and in 3rd grade to train your kids to become somebody in 9th grade, and then meeting with a consultant like John to become an even better person, more stronger person. So I think I'm truly believe the more educating yourself, the more 土壤 better for your kids to be knowing this ahead of time, not just going to 9th grade. I also see very educated parents come to John and John ask a question for the kids. And I just see painfully the kids like everything is no, everything is I don't know. Then, you know, when you're coming here like 9th grade like that, I'm sorry, if you want to go to Yale, you're not ready. You know, you're not ready. Even the 4 years working with John is hard because your kids coming with disadvantage of they have not thought about much, but a lot of kids are thought about a lot that make them a little more advanced, even with the John's, you know, team guidance. You know.
Yeah, I think for everything you said is right on. And I think for parents, the easiest way to think about this is really, you know, through your own jobs, right? Like when you apply for a job, especially like a promotion, right? It's like, you know, you already have a job, you know how to do that function. And when you apply for a promotion, I assume, you know, at least when I applied for like promotions or expected promotions, like it wasn't like I was hoping or wondering that they valued me, you know, like, oh gosh, I wonder if this is what they want. Like I had a perspective like, hey, if you want to lower that admit rate, this is how you do it. This is my perspective. Doesn't mean it's the only way to do it, right? But this is my perspective on how you lower it. If you want to have better communication protocol amongst the admissions counselors, this is how you do it. And then they evaluate like, okay, John said this, Sandy said that, right? If you just say I can facilitate the function, right? Like, you know, I can make sure that apps are read. Well, great. Like everybody can do, every admissions director can do that. What's your perspective on how it's going to be done uniquely, right? And so that's what we're talking about with the students is like, there was an editor of the newspaper before you. There will be an editor of the newspaper after you. What did you bring to the table? Who are you? What is your perspective about being an editor of the newspaper? If you can communicate that, then you have a shot, you know, because people want people that have a perspective that they can share and contribute. If you're just kind of like, you know, doing things the way everyone else did it, then who cares? Nobody needs that. It's been done already, you know?
Yeah, that's so important. Emphasize 家长就是最后拼的是你的孩子有没有自己的观点。我们中国很多家庭的孩子就是存在这个问题，就是没有观点，因为我们不在乎听小孩子的观点，也不在乎在家庭当中培养小孩子有观点。最后我们 team 看到很多孩子就是没有很好的观点，就哪怕错的观点，你也要有一个观点。所以这样说的是个 perspective。如果你现在还早，赶紧培养孩子。有他自己的 opinion 和 perspective. That's so important. 否则的话，你真的学习成绩也很好，但是如果没有自己的观点的话，你还是会落后。因为我们看到那些能够去 Stanford、Yale、Harvard、UPenn 这些学校的孩子，真的他们是有自己 very strong 的 opinion，而且大胆，非常 confident express their opinion. So that's what I see. The kids are differentiate themselves besides their GPAs and also SAT. Things. Okay, next question. I have a lot of questions, 31 questions. There's so many. Let's see if we can get through them. Oh, does Cornell look at express interest?
No.
Yeah. Those good school, they don't care, right? Because okay, next one. Is it hard to switch majors in Cornell between colleges?
It's hard to switch colleges at Cornell. There's a 70% admit rate and there's a process. In fact, some of my students hire me back for the internal transfer process because there is complication and you do have to write essays for it. So I would consider it hard. Yes.
Yes. Yeah. It's a transfer. Just what we talk about. It's new transfer. Okay. I'm quickly. Okay. Donald, if my child is planning to double major, is that possible to double major with a major that is not already grouped together within the main major they're planning to go with? For example, my child planned to major in fashion design, which is possible to double major with marketing, but she wants to double major it with graphic design.
I admittedly don't know the answer to that question. It really is a question of like, you probably could do a minor in graphic design pretty easily. You can pretty much minor across colleges pretty easily, but double majoring across colleges is challenging to do and not guaranteed by any means. So I would say probably like, there's always a difference between getting a major, right? Like when you talk about minor, usually it's 4 to 5 classes, and a major is usually 9 to 11 classes, depending. So like the other thing you have to remember is like, a major is a major, a minor is a minor, right? But like, in my resume, for example, like if I didn't have a major or a minor in something that I wanted, but I took classes in that area, like I will basically put it on my resume, group the classes and say like, relevant instruction, right? And kind of group it under an academic area. So I guess my point is like, you can get the experiences and get the classes. It's less likely that you actually get the actual major because you probably don't get all the classes met in requirements finished in 4 years to make that happen. Probably major, minor.
Okay. Okay, this question is quite long. I'm going to try to, from Allison. Thank you very much for the wonderful session. If you have a minute, I have a couple questions. Number one, regarding research projects, for students have no college university connections, most likely no reply from colleges, forefather sending my many emails. However, is that rumor that highly selective the school do not like paid research project that student to do with a mentor teacher outside of a high school? Let me just give you number one. And she has two questions.
Well, I would say right now, Harvard, MIT, and Columbia are the only 3 schools in the country that I'm aware of that do have research supplement requirements whereby they ask for the letter, like the research mentors have to write letters of rec, and they are asking the research mentors whether or not they were paid. Now, you can surmise, you can guess that they are downgrading the people who paid for it, and I would agree with that generally. Like they're probably not asking the question if they don't care, if they're not downgrading it in their head. So for those 3 places, you could argue if those are your long-term goals, that paying for research experience whereby the researcher would have to identify that would be possibly detrimental. In those situations, you would either do one of 2 things. You would organically reach out. In that situation, it's very much like what I just said about applying for a job, right? You have to identify, hey, you're a researcher doing X. This is what I've been doing. You probably have to have research experience already, maybe ones you paid for, have a perspective, and then be able to come back and say, I have a perspective. I have something to share with you. It doesn't mean that, something groundbreaking, but something of value to share. I've had students do that before. Stanford, honestly, has been one of the schools that I was surprised by how they're still inaccessible, but compared to other places, they were more open to working with students for free than I expected. So maybe you check out there, but usually you have to have research experience in advance of that for them to even consider that. The other way would be to apply to the highly competitive research programs where, they don't have fees, but there's an application process. I would do that if I knew 1,000,000% that the student was like Harvard level material and that was their long-term goal, then I would do that. But in 99% of instances, it makes sense to go with paid mentorship or paid mentorship in advance of organic/competitive research experiences.
Okay, second question is that true? Highly selected school prefer ACT, SAT score after completing sophomore year instead of a score in August, September at the beginning of sophomore year?
No, I mean, they don't care when the SAT or ACT is taken. I think what you're saying is true as it relates to it's probably a better idea to take it at the beginning. We're saying, wait, hold on, it's completing sophomore year. I would say that you would take it after sophomore year. You won't take it at the beginning of sophomore year because it's going to be harder then. And the score, you want the highest score possible. So it doesn't matter when you take it, as long as it's ready for the time you press submit on your app, ED1, November 1st of your senior year.
Will be very difficult to apply to Cornell successfully with not so much public benefit activities.
No, it depends. I mean, it depends on the area you're going into. You could apply to fashion management, right, and have no public benefit activities, and that would be absolutely fine as long as you have a fashion management portfolio. So it depends. But I would say, generally speaking, of course, like, a big part of my method is localization of the investigation. So if I'm interested in, astrophysics, I don't care. Like, I want to localize that. I want to investigate that on a local level. I had a student who's investigating astrophysics. There was like a meteor that fell. It's in Yale's library. It was 20 minutes from his house. He's interviewing the faculty there. So like, we want to localize the investigation no matter what, but you don't necessarily have to have some this isn't about a nonprofit or having some public impact. That's not necessary in lots of majors.
Yeah. If the boy is very strong in sports, have some interest in engineer, how this major can be combined too. sports and engineering?
Well, I've done it before. I mean, I've had students, and analyze, how balls, how a tennis ball hits the ground differently when it's wet versus when it's not wet. So there's a million different ways to do this. I would say it's not my first choice to double down on athletics, but I have done it successfully. I've had a student who was like super obsessed with baseball. We turned every single thing he did was investigating baseball. We did it through business. We did it through data, statistics, computer science, et cetera. So it can be done. If the student will be significantly more passionate because of the topic area, then I say go for it. But generally speaking, I think you could have a more compelling localized engineering story than like using athletics to investigate it. That's my own opinion, but you could do it. I had a golf student do engineering as well. Like they created like this, what is it? I didn't physically see it. I saw a video of it, but basically you stand on this platform and it was like trying to simulate like I forget what it's called, but like basically like the slope of the swing, up or down. And so, he created that and he marketed it, and that was compelling as well. So, there's definitely ways to do it, but I consider the more compelling engineering stories like the young lady who, her mom or her grandmother owned an orchard, and we had her interview all the orchard people and find out what the most annoying parts of their day was. And then she created like a machine learning algorithm that like would go up and down the orchard rows, take pictures and identify whether these apples were ripe or not, and then the whole story was built around like, the investigation, the questions that were being asked, et cetera. That's more compelling than like the sports angle.
Okay. And I'm sorry, right now it's about 10:53, and we have so many questions to go through. We're not able to, I apologize. I know you have a lot of passion and I want to ask John about questions, but if you seriously think about, John is the right person, obviously give us a lot of, knowledge and guidance, and I am sure John will be helping the right student going to even higher level. So scan the barcode on the right-hand side. We'll be able to arrange for 30 minutes. Obviously, John's time is very limited and John's very busy. So take this seriously. If you are serious thinking about that, you can scan the barcode on the right-hand side to have that, opportunity if I'm not able to get to you for all the questions. Right now, the question is, if the student have 2 Bs in 10th grade, the hoping going first tier school is gone, right?
Depends on what you consider to be first tier. I mean, I would say Harvard, Princeton, Yale, Stanford, MIT, probably yes. Could you get to Cornell still, like an ILR school, if we do the right story? Yeah, you could still be successful to get to that level. But Harvard, Princeton, Yale, yeah, probably.
Okay. Is a aspiring aerospace engineer major viewed under the same lens as mechanical engineer major during the application process?
I would say pretty similar. Mechanical engineering, I mean, I would lean towards aerospace engineering over mechanical, just because mechanical will be more common and typical. And in essence, when you say aerospace engineering, you're in essence saying I have some perspective, right, on mechanical and probably electrical engineering and an area that I want to be in. And so it's a little more specific and probably has better story foundation because of that. But they're pretty similar in regards to how they would be reviewed.
Okay. If change major is so common in the college, why admission officers still care or believe the major you put in your college application?
Well, the reason they care is because it's of the business function that they need students in all these areas. So, there has to be an awareness, or you basically, like, if you just closed your eyes, didn't care what academic area, you would have tons of econ and computer science, right? Biology students, you'd have no humanities and social science students in certain areas. So from a business function, they need to do it. In regards to like, what was the second part of the question?
What they care, why they care if since everybody changed.
Well, because the thing is like you can say like, oh, we're just going to change your mind, but like you still need evidence, right? So like I can say, well, hey, well, this is silly. Why are we doing this? I'm just going to put down communications and then I'm going to be a computer science major. But you got to look like a communications student, right? Like they got to believe you 100% that you're communications. So now you're saying like, well, why would they make the students go through all that? Well, they're hoping you're not lying, of course. Like they're trying to identify who are curious communication students, right? That's really what this is. And if you come across as a curious communication student, which is way easier than being a curious bio student because there's so many of them and they're so competitive, then you can be really successful. So, it's not like they're not asking you to play a game. I'm simply saying that this isn't about a game. It really is about, like, from my perspective, when you're young, I mean, most adults barely even know what they want to do long term, right? So like when you're young, it's like it's so crazy to like be put in this box. And yet you are being asked to identify what you want to do. And so you have to ask yourself, if I'm being asked to identify, and some of them are really challenging, and I really don't know, why would I choose super challenging stuff? And I'm not 100% sure yet. Like that's really where I'm at. And so, we try to find that happy medium.
Okay. This question interesting. Can experienced admission officer tell from the application package which student has help from private counselor, which is not? From your experience as AO, what are some telling signs for the student have to hire, help?
I would say no. I mean, you know a privileged student when you see one. Like, I mean, they go to a top tier school, their parents are physicians, it's written on their app. I mean, privilege when you see it. And certainly when privilege is part of the conversation, like it is sometimes more challenging for a privileged student, right? Like, oh, both parents are PhDs, they both went to Stanford. There's a privilege there that actually makes it more challenging sometimes to get in. Like they're looking like, of course you have access to lots of opportunities. You should do well, So, I would say when it's all said and done, privileged students often there's a feel to the app. Like, if I look at a student from Harvard Westlake, like, yeah, like that app is going to look different than a typical public school app. And so of course the reader takes that into account. But when it's all said and done, when you look at the apps, like if a student has really good grades, right? Like, and every single student that we're talking about that gets admitted to an Ivy or Ivy League school has really good grades, then the reader kind of believes you, right? They believe you that you are intellectually capable. And so now the second question is, how do I decide? Right? Like, I mean, do I pick John or do I pick Sophia? I mean, and it's like, well, John said something really fascinating and interesting. Sophia didn't. What if John had help? I don't know. As a reader, what do I do with that? Do I just say like, well, maybe John had help. Should I just take the person who has less and I should just assume like this person didn't have help? We know that because they did a worse job. I'm going to take them. That's not what happened. They never do that. They take the student that did a better job. Now, if it's obvious, like, hey, you got a bunch of D's in your transcript and this looks like it was written by a Harvard graduate in English, then of course that's going to be a problem. But that's never the case, honestly. Like my students, they all have good grades. And, once in a while, there's a student that's a little bit weaker, but for the most part, they all have good grades. And now we need a reader to say, I want that one. Is there a risk sometimes that the reader looks at, sometimes I read an app and I think like, man, this is a really interesting, deep student. Like, is a reader going to believe this? Well, I could ask myself that question, but I could also ask myself the question of like, if the student isn't interesting and deep, is the reader going to select him or her? And the answer is no. So I'm going to take the shot that maybe it's possible, right? Like maybe the rec says the student's boring and not interesting and not very smart. If that's the case, then we're probably in trouble, because maybe they don't believe, they're still not going to say like you cheated, but they might say, this is inconsistent, a red flag, it's inconsistent. I'm just going to waitlist a student. But if you want to have a shot, you got to give the best product out there. And that's the truth.
I totally agree. It's almost like looking for a job. Many of them looking for a professional to edit their resumes, and many of them hire somebody to coaching their interview skills. If they're getting a job, will they hire a manager saying, oh, did you hire a coach to teach you communication skill? You know what I'm saying? We all have a mentor along the way. So what's wrong? Hire somebody knowing better to coach us to become a better person. And your kids will learn from it. Otherwise, why don't you go to school? Why don't you just learn from the home and go to school? You have a teacher helping you. You have a better teacher helping you. You have a less teacher helping you. Along the way, everybody can have ability, hire somebody helping you to become a better person. Ultimately, you become a better student, right? Better person, better student. So that's common sense, right? Okay.
Definitely. And the thing I'll just add is like, I really do think, I mean, listen, getting into college is part of this, right? I mean, that's 90% of but most of my students, most of them, not all, most of them develop a confidence about the way they engage with the world around them. Like they want to interview. It's not like I'm hoping to God that this interviewer values what I say. It's I know I have something valuable to say. And if they don't recognize it, then they missed an opportunity. And that's true. Like sometimes not everyone's going to connect with what you say, but you got to believe it. And that's what we got to get to, where with most students that they know that there's something valuable and they're excited to share that.
Exactly. Yeah, I do see the difference. Hire a right consultant, had to be right consultant. The student do feel more mature after this whole process. They become like a young man, boy become a young man, girl become lady. Seriously, we see many difference. Okay. Thank you. How competitive is philosophy?
Not very. The truth. There's not that many apps in the area.
Yeah.
There's no expectation of exactly what you're supposed to do. So yeah, you can be very successful if you have a very deep layered philosophy story with no achievement, right? In like math, right? Or biology, like you got to achieve something. Then you're not getting to Harvard, right? Like with no achievement, but philosophy, you might not achieve something and you could still in theory possibly be successful.
Yeah, this question, I think we're getting to an end. Are you saying engineer is a little easier to apply than art and science in general?
I think so. I mean, I think if you asked 10 consultants, they would all disagree with me. Most of them are not informed enough to disagree, but they would disagree because they look at the stats, right? They say, well, look, the admit rate's lower, the SAT scores are higher, the average math score is higher, but that's stats, right? Like, stats don't tell the whole story. Like, if I'm competing, if I take a student and I say, I can have them compete in the arts and sciences pool or the engineering pool. Number one, when I look at the engineers, they're all STEM, right? So I don't start in a deficit position of saying, well, in arts and sciences, they need humanities, they need social science, and that's a total number that they're looking at. So I don't start in a deficit position. Two, all of them are literally engineers. So that means that all of them have done similar things in high school. They're all in the robotics teams. They've done similar experiences. That means that minor changes in form, structure, experience will differentiate you as compared to arts and sciences, where I'm competing with public health, biology, computer science, economics. They're all in these different areas. So yeah, I personally would take an engineering app all day, assuming I had the right math sequence. I need math to be where it needs to be. But outside of that, I'd take math, engineering all day over arts and sciences. But 9 out of 10 consultants would disagree with me.
Okay, it's past 11. We're supposed to be ended now. I still have a lot of questions, didn't go through them. Maybe just last one. Okay, quickly, because, we need to let John to get, some rest. Can a student double major in 2 different colleges?
Not at Cornell, it's very difficult. At many, I'd say most universities, it's difficult to do. Most colleges, universities, if you go visit them and ask them about it, they will kind of give you this answer that makes it sound like you probably can, because they want flexibility and facilitation. It really depends on what those majors are. Like if they're underrepresented majors, easy. If they're highly competitive majors where they don't have a lot of spaces, they'll just make it harder on you. At Lehigh, for example, like transferring into the engineering school was very difficult because that's like what they were known for. So the answer is like sometimes you can, but it's not something I would be like expecting.
Thank you very much. Thank you, John. It's past 11. Thank you for everyone. You're still online with us. Time goes so fast. Just 2 hours. I feel there's so many good questions. Today is really, really good questions. A lot of them. And thank you very much for answering them with the patience. And again, thank you, Allison, behind the scene for the technical support. And thank you all for all the parents raise a good question. Hopefully we will have John coming back again sometimes in the future. Continue to answer some of the questions you may have. But right now, if you think he's the right person to guide your child to become a better person, you can scan the barcode. We're going to leave this page up there for a while. Thank everyone. And John, thank you once again for a wonderful presentation. Thank you for your wisdom, your time, and your knowledge. And thank you for your caring as well to all the IvyCompass students. Thank you very much. And congratulations for the past successful year. Thank you very
so much, Sophia. This was a great event. I appreciate the opportunity to be on this platform, and I hope everyone has a great weekend. Thank you so much. Happy Easter, everyone.
Thank you. Happy Easter. Happy holiday.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.